always start out with just what you're hearing in your district and what you see are the most important issues facing the district, and how, as a member of Congress, you could help with that.
Okay, well, I think there's three main issues facing my district. In particular, has to be the economy and jobs, and how do we get America working again. Second of all would have to be health care, not just Medicare for seniors, but health care for families, both through their job and through private ability to purchase affordable health care. And third would be the debt. The first thing with the economy, I think moving forward, is to bring certainty to the private sector. I'm a business owner. We need to reform our taxes, give a flat, tax rate moving forward. And, we can't go year to year in business trying to plan in order to grow our business, expand, predict hiring. So we'd like certainty moving forward in the private sector to hire. Pull back on the regulations. I know Obamacare is, the Affordable Care Act is something that has a lot of businesses very concerned how it will impact them. Also, our businesses faced a 27% increase in health insurance cost. So many of my employees have opted not to be able to contribute their fair share moving forward. So that's been difficult. I'd say amongst seniors, Medicare doesn't seem to be an issue. We're being honest with them up front, telling them that it won't impact them for the next 10 years, and that we're moving forward to try to make the program solvent moving on. I think the biggest thing with seniors is the debt. This is the most fiscal generation we've ever known in our lives, and they just can't believe that we're going to pass on this kind of debt with no plan to move forward, how to pay down the debt, how to rein in our out-of-control deficits every year. So those are the main issues facing everyone in our district.
Did the redistricting make change the political coloration any?
Yes, I think as Republicans we gain about another 4% of Republicans. So looking at the numbers, if we take all of the Republicans and the independents together, we outnumber the Democrats by about 23,000 votes. So for us it makes the race much more winnable. We believe that we're winning over many independents, as well as some Democrats that are conservative and moderate Democrats. So we believe that our message moving forward with the new district lines are definitely more favorable to us this year, as well as me running for the second time. The name ID is there, and so we're very confident of our ability to win this race.
So I think that sort of answered the questions I was going to ask, which was, 2010 was very much a Republican year, but Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz won pretty handily anyway.
Yes, she did. I was a first-time candidate. I only had about 6 months to campaign, so I had no name ID in the district, and I had no experience on even how to campaign. So we learned a lot that time. But now we've been campaigning for about 16 months, and we took this race outside of the district. We went all across the state of Florida. And that was a strategy we knew because of who my opponent is and the fact that she's the DNC chair. We thought we could garner a lot of, help from around the state, and it's definitely worked. We now have almost 15,000 donors from all 50 states, and we're calling this America's race. Everyone's taking notice of this race, know the importance of this race, and how well Debbie and I contrast each other to give South Floridians a real clear choice this November.
Talk about immigration and what seems to be taking so long to really come up with an immigration strategy, policy, laws for handling undocumented aliens.
It's been disappointing to watch the president circumvent Congress and the laws we already have on the books and initiate an executive order by allowing children who were brought here by no fault of their own to get a 2-year pass to stay. I don't think that we're a country that we should have the right to do that in any position. We have laws on the books that we need to follow. But I think the reason it's taking so long is because it's a very touchy issue that people don't want to be able to address. And many people that are in politics or have been for a long time skirt around that issue. We have to do something with those that were brought here by, not their own will, and make a decision how to handle that moving forward. But we are a country of laws, and we can't allow our president to circumvent those laws because he thinks it's something, especially in a political year, that might help him.
How should it be handled?
It should be handled through Congress, through the laws that we have.
What policies would you argue for? Would you support or reject?
Well, I think the ones that I would argue for is that we already have laws on the books that need to be enforced and followed. And if people think those laws are unfair or they have something else that should be presented, then we need to sit down and together in a bipartisan way see how to move forward with that. But we have an enormous amount of undocumented people in this country. And right now, economically, I think it's a huge burden on us, both through Medicaid, through food stamps, through our school systems, through our local and counties, to be able to afford these undocumented workers. And we can't keep, giving them incentives to come here and provide for them. And, we're suffering right now financially, and I think many Americans that I speak to in the district are deeply concerned about illegal immigrants coming to this country and taking jobs that could otherwise be for them. But it is a very serious issue that we need to address. And I think we have to put an emphasis on employers, such as myself, to make sure that we have some sort of e-verify system. I mean, undocumented workers come here because they look for work. And if we can put stronger laws against employers hiring, I think that will deter them from coming to this country any longer.
What kind of business do you have? You mentioned you have a fifth of a stake in your family business.
Right.
What does
Well,
it
we
do?
have restaurants. We have 3 restaurants, and I'm the president of one corporation, the vice president of another, and on the third location, I'm the treasurer. But together, there's 5 children, so I own 1/5 of the corporation. But we've been in business now 38 years here in Broward County, 1 in Hollywood and 2 in Pembroke Pines. Something we started in 1974.
All the same name?
All the same name.
And
Ricky's.
oh, Ricky's.
Yes.
Okay.
2 years ago, as I remember, there was a primary in the Republican race, and there were 2 other people running against.
Yes.
But this year there was no primary.
Oh no, there was 5 of us.
We
There were
did.
5?
Yeah, we did do the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a 5-way primary this time, which I got almost 50% of the vote in a 5-way primary. So.
What are the,
Can I ask? Oh,
sure,
Yes, please.
please.
You mentioned Debbie Wasserman Schultz with her national profile, and you're getting a lot of help from out within the state.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of help are you getting from the folks in Washington, the Republican National Committee? Is there any national support from the party? Have they talked to you, and what kind of conversations have you had with them?
Well, we've met with them several times in D.C. I am part of the NRCC, what's called the Young Guns program, where I'm a candidate on the program. The primary just finished a couple weeks ago, but we should be moved up in status. There's 3 levels that you achieve in that, but I should be considered a young gun at this point, so we're just waiting for the final word. Many organizations throughout D.C. are helping us. Susan B. Anthony, the Eagle Forum, the National Rights to Life. We have just great endorsements, Michelle Bachmann, Mark Levin, congressmen and women from all over the country. I've met several times with Reince Priebus. Everybody's watching the race very closely, and now that the primary is done, they're just looking for new poll numbers to see how the race looks.
You mentioned deficit reduction.
Mm-hmm.
How would you go about it? I mean, do you support the Ryan budget? There's some, Governor Romney has made some distinctions as to how he'd go about it, so I wonder what your ideas are.
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is worry about our yearly deficits. Right now we spend $1.2 trillion more than we take in. So addressing the yearly one is the first thing. So I do support a balanced budget amendment that on the federal level, just like we do here on the state level, we only spend what we take in. I also think part of that yearly budget at the federal level has to include our entitlement programs of Medicaid. It should also include Medicare and Social Security, because most of them are just running right now on autopilot. I think those need to be included as well. But even if you do that yearly, we're still looking at $16 trillion in debt. So we have to look at how we pay that down, even if we do balance our budget yearly, because that's still there. So we're going to have to make cuts across the board to all departments. And then we're going to have to start to look at what I consider a successful plan is the sunshine provision, where you go in, find programs that are not working, are not successful, and we start to eliminate some of those programs. Because as we know in federal government, once a program is initiated, they never seem to determine whether it's successful or not, and they just keep funding it over and over again.
Do you have a candidate, for a program that could be cut or eliminated?
Well, there's so many, it's hard to say. If we can just roll back to perhaps the '08 budget line and let which is probably about 10% where they are now, less of them spending, we can start there. I'd say definitely the EPA is a program that's very large, very intrusive, a lot of regulations that are impeding us now here in the country. So that's one of the main programs. I'd like to see the Department of Education on a federal level scaled back. I'd like to see states keep more of their own money and make more educational decisions that's best for their states. And Department of Energy, I'd really like to know what the Department of Energy is up to. I mean, we're not energy independent. We don't seem to be being able to look at more energy options. So I'd like to see where all the money is going that we put into the Department of Energy.
You say cut all departments to the Pentagon?
Absolutely. I think everybody can find waste within their own departments that they can cut back on. All departments, absolutely.
There's another issue that I'm sure you're aware of, and you hear about it all the time, and that is mortgage reduction. You know, the mortgage issue and the housing problem.
Right.
Foreclosures and such. You know, the president has tried a lot of things. I would say that by and large, they haven't been wildly successful. Any ideas along those lines?
Well, it's really at the heart of why we ever had the financial crisis in the first place. Comes right down to the housing market. And I think it's been a push by the government through Fannie and Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and encouraging these mortgages and banks to loan money to people who could not afford it. So the fact that the government wants to try to fix what I believe they helped to create, is it part of the banking problem as well? And did Wall Street add to it? Yes, but we pushed through government for these loans to go to people. So we need to look and address our issue of why we still have Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and why we are continually still giving out these types of loans and we haven't stopped doing it. So until we can address the issue of the interference of the government into the housing market, can we begin to solve it?
You mentioned when you were talking about immigration that there needs to be some sort of bipartisan solution. Talk about your ability to work across the aisle.
Well, absolutely. When I'm in business for as long as we've been, you don't get things done because it's only your way. I think people in Washington on both sides of the aisle can work together. And I think there's a lot of good Democrats as well as Republicans that understand moving forward with our country is not going to be by a party only. It's got to come together, solutions with people from both sides of the aisle. And I think that's capable. I think that's very workable. We saw it under the Clinton years. With Newt Gingrich and his ability as Speaker of the House to work together with both parties to reform welfare. So absolutely, we want to go there. And Debbie and I have different philosophies of how to move our country forward. It would be difficult for me to work with someone like her that's so far to the left with her ideology. There's moderate Democrats, there's conservative Democrats that I think understand moving this country forward starts with the American people and not the federal government.
Where would you put yourself? You were describing moderate Democrats, conservative Democrats.
Right.
Same goes for Republicans. How would you do that?
Well, first of all, when I campaign, I always tell people I'm an American first, I'm a conservative, and then I'm a Republican. So I consider myself a conservative. I support limited government. I support low taxes, keeping my personal freedoms, but I also support a strong national defense. I don't think we can be the world's economic superpower without being a military superpower. So I support keeping our defense very strong.
Well,
Go ahead.
that takes us, I think, to the questions, a couple of foreign policy questions. One on Iran. What do you think as a president? What do you think of the president's policy on Iran? Too forward? What should he do differently?
Well, I think what's happened with our president is I don't think we have the respect that is needed from our allies across the globe. I think the pressures that we continue to put on Iran for sanctions, we need more support from China, from Russia, and I don't think we're getting the support we needed. So I think the president needs to work harder in the Middle East to secure allies that work with us to continue those hard sanctions against Iran, but we also need to stand strong with Israel. Israel has that right to determine what course of action they need to take for peace in the Middle East. And unfortunately, I don't believe our president has stood strong with Israel and allowing them to create that path to peace and asking them to go back to those 67 borders. He also asked them to stop building in Jerusalem, in their own capital. So I think as an ally to Israel, we need to stand with them, unified with them, and let them know that we are their strong ally, and if they need us, we'll be there. So I would like to see us stay, with Israel, not behind them.
And Israel's a big issue in your district, because you have a high number of Jewish American voters, correct?
Yes.
How do we have a breakdown? Do you have a ballpark figure of what the Jewish American vote is in your district?
No, I don't have quite a breakdown on that.
Okay.
No, but I know also our district has changed a lot, and we have a lot more Hispanics too that can vote. Venezuelans and Colombians out in the western area
Right.
that can also now vote this time. I think it's almost even in the Hispanic to the Jewish vote.
Certainly Latin America is not a huge issue, nationally. People rarely talk about it. But in your district, Colombians, Venezuelans, people like that, they tend to listen or look for candidates who have some opinions in these races. Do you get asked about that? Do you have any opinions?
No, most of the time what they say to me is they've come to this country because America is a land of opportunity and they have freedoms here and they have the right to achieve goals and success. And they certainly don't want to go back to a socialized style country. That's why they came to America. The Cubans are, of course, the most passionate of all. But most of the Colombians and Venezuelans I meet are just strong conservatives overall. So our ideology seems to fit in line with each other. But no, they came to this country to be successful, and they hope America can continue on that path.
It's a question that came up actually during the 2010 Senate debate, but there was a lot made of the Bush tax cuts and extending them.
Mm-hmm.
The Obama administration has extended them, and the argument that President Obama makes is, we've tried these tax cuts for 10 years now, and they haven't worked. What's your response to that?
Well, I disagree with that. I think for, leading up into the housing market crash, I think the tax cuts were very successful. I don't think we've ever taxed our way to prosperity last time I checked. The reason taxes were higher and successful under the Clinton administration in the 90s was the dot-com era. It was the era of technology. Everybody needed a phone, everybody needed a computer, so those higher taxes didn't really have a negative effect on the economy. Looking now, we've been in a recession. Our GDP growth is anemic at 1.5%. Unemployment remains high. This is no time to raise taxes. And we need to close the tax loopholes at the top, have a flat tax rate with a couple deductions and a few write-offs. And so everybody has a little bit of skin in the game. But this is not a time in which is approaching another recession for us in which we should raise taxes. It absolutely will not work. And we've proven, where they've showed the numbers, that if we do raise taxes, especially on those in the top 1%, it's only enough to fund the federal government for about 8 days. So raising taxes in this kind of climate is catastrophic, I believe.
And there's been more talk of Simpson Bowles again, even though kind of it was ignored last year, but it's come back again. Do you support what they have proposed, which includes pretty serious spending cuts, as well as taxes, or the way they call them, revenue enhancers?
Right. The Simpson Bowl is a very strong and bold plan. It's even stronger and tougher than the Ryan plan. So I think together between both plans, it's an understanding of where we are at. This is a very serious time in our country's history, and it must be addressed seriously. I mean, $16 trillion is nothing to laugh at. Spending more each year is unbelievable. All of us can't do that in our lives, in our business, in our homes. So yes, it is going to take serious, bold action of strong cuts, and they're going to be painful. And we're going to have to do them over a period of time where Americans can adjust to it. But right now we have almost 50% of Americans are dependent on the federal government for some form of their need to survive. And once we pass that mark, we may never get back our country again.
Then you support the cuts, but not any of the tax increases in Simpson Bowles?
Correct.
I wanted to ask just, this has come up, I guess, in this weekend's paper. We had a long piece about Miami Beach, and since that's part of your district, looking at how they can deal with rising sea level. You know, regardless of how, you know, in your questionnaire you make it clear that you're not supporting the idea of global warming or climate change, but the reality is there's something going on in the you know, the sea rise. So do you see a federal role in helping the folks in Miami Beach to do the kind of engineering that's going to be required to kind of help ease that problem and control it in the short term?
Well, that's a very serious problem, beach erosion. Being here in South Florida my whole life, I've watched them come in and dredge the sand from out there to bring it in to extend our shorelines. It's a huge problem. I see the federal government playing a role in that. I'd like to see the states, of course, take a bigger charge in that, but they may need some federal assistance. But tourism is a huge part of our state and our economy, and if we can't provide a good beach for tourists, I mean, there's no attraction for them to come here, as well as residents. My parents live in the beach in Lauderdale by the sea, and they've watched the beach erode just since they've lived there the last 3 years. So I think it's an important issue for residents, for tourism, for businesses. It's our biggest attraction here in Florida.
I want to return to foreign policy just for a minute. What should the United States be doing in Syria? What would you support?
Well, that's a difficult one in Syria. We've seen the loss of Egypt, one of our biggest allies, for a long time, and I was very disappointed that as Americans we didn't take a stronger role to try to help save Egypt as being one of our strongest allies over there. Now in Syria, there's a huge conflict. I think we feel the rise of the terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood, just taking over every nation in the region. I would like to see countries that still have some sort of relationship over in that area offer some assistance to the people, whether it's through food or assistance in any way. I certainly would hate to lose another country over in that region to perhaps the Muslim Brotherhood. Militarily, I don't think it's our position to step in any way. I would just hope that we would offer any support to Syria. Once we do determine, is it the Syrian government attacking the people? Is it the Muslim Brotherhood and the terrorist groups attacking the people? I think it's hard for us in the media to get a real straight answer. So I don't have a lot of knowledge as to who's attacking who over there. I think a large question remains, but I'd certainly hate to lose another country in that region.
Good. Do we have anything else? Would you like to just talk a little bit about anything you think we can wrap it up, we may have missed, or that you'd like to make sure that we're aware of?
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. But the biggest thing we talk about in the district between myself and my opponent is that they're really going to have a clear choice. We say it on the presidential level, but Debbie and I are separate on so many issues. Now, someone can choose to pick a career politician, like my opponent, who's been in government almost 20 years, right out of college, who supports the failed, what I believe are un-American policies of this president. She supports higher taxes and supports bigger government. Or take someone like myself, a small business owner who's lived in the community her whole life, who understands the burden of taxes, over-regulations, and how harmful they are to our economy. And I'm someone that does not support promoting Americans to become part of a bigger welfare state. So there is quite a difference of what the people of South Florida will have to choose this time.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all for taking the time.
Thank you.
All right, great.